America during the 1920s. When you think about this decade, you definitely think about gangsters. And this is because it was a gangster era. One of the most prominent mafia leaders was Alphonse Gabriel Al Capone. He was born in Brooklyn, New York on January 17, 1899. His parents, Gabrielle and Teresina Capone, were both immigrants that came from Italy. Actually, his father, Gabriel, was a barber from Castellammare di Stabia, a small town located 16 kilometers south from Naples at the southern part of Italy. That's why, since his early childhood, Capone was in a dichotomy between hamburger and pizza, between Italian traditions that his family held since decades ago, and the new traditions that America had to offer. That's why Al Capone showed to be a very important leader since his childhood, because he mixed the Italian world with the American world. Actually, he was a promising student, but still he had trouble with the rules at his parochial high school. He dropped out of school at the age of 14 after being expelled for hitting a women teacher in the face. After that incident, Capone's life turned to be dirty and obscure. Al Capone's dirty life started when he joined small-time gangs such as the Junior 40 Thieves and the Bowery Boys. With Johnny Torrio's help, Capone became well known in the world of dirty gangs. Actually, Johnny Torrio was the 5 Points gang leader. He was one of the first mobsters that came from Italy to the United States, and he was a prominent figure in the gangsters' world. He was Capone's mentor. Alongside with Johnny Torrio, Frankie Yale, who was a bartender in Coney Island, and who was the leader of a dance club and hall called the Harvard Inn, they both helped Capone during his early life as a gang member. During his work at the Harvard Inn, Capone gained his nickname Scarface during a fight. Capone insulted a woman while working at the Brooklyn nightclub, and he was brutally attacked by her brother Frank Galuscio. Galuscio stabbed Capone 3 times on his left side of his face, and according to Capone's testimony, he said that those were war wounds. But finally, at the end of his life, he recognized that Frank Galuscio actually attacked him at the Harvard Inn club, and he recognized that Galuscio was the perfect brother and the perfect man because he was brave and he defended her sister when Capone insulted her. On December 30, 1918, Capone lived one of the most wonderful moments in his life when he married May Josephine Coughlin, who was an Irish Catholic and who earlier that month gave birth to their first son, Albert Francis Sonny Capone. After his first son was born, Capone decided that in order to gain more money and to make his career more and more powerful, his future wasn't in New York, but in Chicago. So without his new wife and son, who joined him later, Capone decided to purchase a small house at 7244 South Prairie Avenue in the Park Manor neighborhood on the city's south side for just $5,500. That was in 1923. Capone was formally recruited by Johnny Torrio's gang. Torrio had problems with the Black Hand, which was a very powerful gang in Chicago and Chicago's outskirts. He saw many business opportunities in Chicago, and the business opportunities were always linked to violence. So Torrio and Capone started cleaning Chicago's streets for them to start leading and operating the bootlegging business in the city. Torrio took over the crime empire of James Big Jim Colosimo after Colosimo was murdered. In 1924, the elections took place. And those were the elections where Capone's power grew stronger than ever before. Capone paid tens of public employees because he wanted those elections to be the best elections in town, and he wanted his leaders to be the ones coming to high political positions in Cicero. That's why Capone paid thousands of dollars in bribes and in gifts for politicians. Cicero was now Capone's town. But Capone was not satisfied with just some few politicians being corrupted. He wanted real money, and that's what he got. When Johnny Torrio was hurt in an attack against his life, he decided to return to Italy, and instead he said Capone could be the perfect leader for his gang. That's why he gave all the power to Al Capone. Al Capone during that moment was receiving revenue for his bootlegging business, and the moonshine factories in the Midwest were producing thousands of dollars for him. And at the same time, in the East Coast, the Purple Gang in Detroit, who brought liquor from Canada and the local production, which came from the moonshine operations just along the parts, the outskirts of Chicago, were giving Capone thousands of dollars. In fact, he was winning $100 million per year in revenue. Capone's operations were in top form. According to one source, while Al Capone was in charge of the Chicago outfit, it has been reported that some members of the organization would took his power even beyond to Wabash County, Illinois. Capone's gang members stayed at the Grand Rapids Hotel at the Wabash River next to the Grand Rapids Dam, investing thousands of dollars in luxurious rooms. The organized corrupted attracted attention, and not only attention from big newspapers and the government, but also of rival gangs. The Northside gangsters Jaime Weiss and Bugs Moran, both from Polish origin, wanted the money to stay in Polish hands. They didn't want Italian gangsters to make that much, so they decided to make several attempts against Capone's life. On September 20, 1926, the Northside gang shot into Capone's entourage as he was eating lunch in the Hawthorne Hall restaurant. 10 vehicles were the ones who assaulted Capone using submachine guns, shotguns, and every armory that they could possibly use and find. Capone nevertheless survived the attack and paid for the medical care of a young boy and his mother who were injured during this attack. The event prompted Capone to call for a halt and fire, but negotiations fell. Therefore, Capone had his huge Cadillac fitted with bulletproof glass, run-flat tires, and a police siren. In 1932, Treasury agents working on Prohibition's issues seized the car. But nonetheless, that same car, that same Cadillac, was later used as President Frank D. Roosevelt's limousine. Capone was simply at the top of the food chain. He attracted the attention of local and national newspapers, but also of local and national police leaders. It is believed that in order to maintain power, Capone ordered in 1929 the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in the Lincoln Park neighborhood on Chicago's north side. During the killing, Capone's soldiers were disguised as police officers, and they started a full police raid. 7 members of Buck's Moran rival gang were killed. The problem was, photos of the massacre victims shocked the public and damaged Capone's reputation. Until then, Capone was just a guy who was trying to help people. He was Robin Hood in North America. But after these pictures, Capone's reputation condemned him. In 1929, the Bureau of Investigation under Agent Elliot Ness began an investigation of Capone and his business. Finally, he was indicted due to tax violations, not to any of his violent crimes. In 1931, he was not only indicted for income tax evasions, but also violations of the Volstead Act, which was the act that regarded prohibition. Although his attorneys made several attempts to protect him, he ended up in 1932 in the Atlanta U.S. Penitentiary. In August 11, 1934, Al Capone was transferred to the terrifying Alcatraz prison. There, he was condemned to live under the worst conditions that he had observed during his whole life. Although his cell had some benefits compared to other inmate cells, he finally knew what it was to be a poor person. Finally, Capone's later years were marked by an increasingly rapidly and horribly diminishing attempt of controlling his operations in the whole United States territory. The organized crime grip that Capone had diminished rapidly after his imprisonment, and he was no longer to control his operations neither in Chicago nor in the rest of the United States. Besides, his health was deteriorated under the effects of neurosyphilis. He had become incapable of resuming and controlling his gang activities, and by 1946 his physician said Capone had the mental capability of a 12-year-old child. Therefore, the communists, foreigners, and Buck's Moran and the Polish gangs started to control the gang business and the bootlegging operations in the United States territory. On January 21st, 1947, Al Capone had a stroke, and even though he seemed to be improving, he suffered a fatal cardiac arrest the next day. He died in his home in Miami Beach, Florida, surrounded by his family, after he was released of the Alcatraz prison because of his mental disability. Although Capone wanted us to remember him just as an ordinary businessman giving the people what they wanted, he will be remembered as an icon in popular culture, as one of the most notorious American gangsters of the 20th century. Capone, his personality, his accent, his facial construction, even his physical stature have made him a figure and an icon for many parodies of his name and of his way of being. In the film The Godfather, Al Capone will be remembered by Marlon Brando's Vito Corleone, that refers and reflects exactly to what Capone did in Chicago more than 50 years ago. The stereotypical image of a mobster wearing a black suit and a tilted fedora is based on photos of Al Capone. Capone will certainly be remembered as one of the most important figures of the mobs and mafia during the 20th century, and most importantly, as a violent and at the same time as a great character.